Buddy, I'm glad you're here, and we're on the air. I just wanted to let you know that we had some complaints the last time around because people were jumping on the live chat quickly. So what I've done is I've switched it off and turned it on just before we go live. So now everybody that's queued up here has a chance to jump into the live chat. And also, if you want to do the super chat, you can, at the bottom of the chat window, you'll see a little dollar sign there. You can type on that, and then you pay according to the length of the question. So if you really have to get a question answered, you're more than welcome to do it that route. Okay, so cheers to everybody. I think this is a new tradition that we've all sort of started. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. It's time for a drink. I'm having Italian wine now. That's so good. That's so good. What else is going on? Still no haircut. And I'm at day 4 into growing something on my face. I've never ever grown out my beard. I used to have, when I was growing up, a hockey mustache, 6 aside. So now I'm seeing what that looks like. I think I'm going to give it through the weekend, and it's probably going to go. I'm not sure I love it, but there you go. All right, what else do we want to talk about? Oh yeah, Car Cost Canada. Don't forget to use the promo code MotorMouth and become an expert member. Get your questions in. And oh boy, do we have a lot, and I mean a lot of pictures. We have a lot of pictures to go through. So about a week ago, I said, send your pictures in, and feel free to go and send them to Zach@motormouth.ca, ZACK@motormouth.ca. I'll speak American for you, ZACK@motormouth.ca, and it's not CH, it's CK, okay? Let's get into the, now I missed this last week because Mike got it in just before we went live on the last show, not last week, but on Tuesday. So here is Mike Johnson from Moncton, New Brunswick. A couple of Acuras, an MDX and a TLX. Looking good there, Mike. Glad that you're here with us. Next up is Howard. I think you say your last name, Michelle, with a beautiful, I love the blue, Volkswagen Golf R. Well done. Then we have Christine. That is a beauty. A Lexus LC500. I just think that's the color to get it in too. I think it looks like it has the sort of cashmere or the tan interior. Beautiful car. Next up is Ezra with an Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quattrofoglia, I think is how you say it. And he lives in Puerto Rico. So that's cool. We have somebody from even farther away. So that's our new contest now. How far away can we go somewhere in the world? So I'm here in Vancouver, Canada. Next up is Eric in Montreal. He sent in 3 pictures, loving his Acura. His accent, not Acura, his accent, his Hyundai accent. Good to see you there, Eric. Eric's a regular contributor here on the chat. Then we have Charlottetown Spud. Charlottetown Spud. Those who are regular viewers know I love his handle from PEI, and he's got a beautiful Civic Type R, and asked if we'd ever been to PEI for car events, and yeah, we were there for the Camry 2 summers ago. Next up is Tom Lau, who has 3 beauties. Look at that. An S4, an SQ5, and a Carrera 4S. Now that's a pretty nice looking garage. So you've got your sedan, you got your family unit, and you got your Sunday sports car. That is a really nice setup. Next up, we have Don Collier from Medicine Hat. He sent in a picture for the last show. There he is with his Hellcat again. He said cars and coffee is a lot different now, a lot less people social distancing. This is Sir Frederick from Saskatoon. Here's a nice trio of cars. He's got a beautiful Genesis G70 3.3 turbo sport model. I love the color. That's almost, I think it's exactly the same one that I reviewed here on the channel. Then the wife's Chevy Cruze, which is a totally underrated car, very good car. And then the in-laws have Carmen Ghia, which is a very cool car. That's a nice looking garage too. Next up, this is the farthest away we've had so far. This is Alex, who has been on the chat before, lives in Israel. He's got a Saab 9.5 manual, but this thing has been tuned to 420 horsepower. And that is a part of the world I'd love to visit. I'd love to go to Tel Aviv especially. Next up, this is Chris K. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see him going around Mosport. That's his latest GT. And to the upper left is his Boss 302. Now, you're going to see a bit of a theme here. We have quite a few Mustangs. I think those are beautiful cars. I love the Boss 302. Another Mustang. This is Addy from Montreal. He's got an Acura RDX A-Spec and a beautiful Mustang convertible. That is absolutely gorgeous. And he said he's had his Acura RDX and has had zero issues with it. And there have been some reports, people having issues with the first year or so, but there you go. He says no issues. Next up is Nim in Waterloo, who has a beauty. I love the Grand Cherokee, and that's the SRT bad boy. That's one hell of a unit. I love that. Next up, we have Dwayne from the USA with his Mazda 6. Or sorry, Dwayne, you're from the US. His Mazda 6. It's hard for me to say Mazda. Next up is John Messina from, I'm not sure, John's from Ontario. No, he's from British Columbia. Sorry, he's got BC plates on there, and he's got his Durango. And that is a great vehicle. Basically the long version of the Cherokee. Next up, we have Simon from Vancouver Island with his Intermechanica, which is a replica Porsche made here in Vancouver. There was an engine fire in this one, and he rebuilt the car. That is absolutely stunning. Next up is Grant Fayura, who was on earlier on another show, and there is his 220,000 kilometer XL7 Suzuki V6. That's quite a rare vehicle. Next up, another friend from the US. We have Chris from Jeffersonville, Indiana with his GLI. That's a great car. And here's a pretty nice looking garage. Also from the US, from Florida, goes by the handle Flat 6. He's got a 330e BMW, so the plug-in 3 Series. The wife drives a Raptor. That's pretty badass. And he's got a beautiful Carrera 4S. Now that is a nice looking garage too. And that, my friends, is quite a number of people who send in pictures. It took a while to download all of those. So let's get into the live chat and see what everybody's talking about. So just so you know, I turned the chat window on just before we went live. So everybody has the same kick at the can. And don't forget, you're free to hit the super chat if you can. And also, I'd like to get the likes up. So we have over 100 people on right now. Click the likes. That really helps me. All right, let's go to the super chat. I think we missed one here. Jorge says, what's the best car news you have heard recently? Well, I think the best car news I've heard recently is that production is starting up around the world. I heard the head of Volvo on CNBC today being interviewed talking about they're starting up, or they actually never really shut the line down altogether, but they're doing it at lower capacity, which is kind of what I suggested in one of the previous chats. So the run rate of the assembly lines, instead of pumping out a car roughly every minute, they'll probably drop that down, maybe even every few minutes. And every cartridge that goes along the assembly line, they'll probably leave a space or two in between, which I think is how they're going to do it. So the good news is that cars are being made again, and hopefully we're going to have dealerships selling soon in places where they're not allowed to. Oh, by the way, thanks to my buddy Tony Morris Jr., who sent this over. Moorsport is his company. Hi, Zach. Have you ever added any aftermarket modifications to your cars? For example, body kits and sound systems. Yeah, I've done sound systems. I've done alarms. I've done wheels, of course. I've done, they used to be called chips. They don't really chip them and download for the computer, stuff like that. I've done that to cars over the years. Haven't really done a lot of the really crazy aftermarket stuff. It's not my scene. I kind of like a clean car, as close to original equipment as I can. But some cars, I had an M6 years ago that had metric wheels and tires. What kind of idiotic, crazy German-French system was that? BBS wheels with Michelin tires. You could only buy one tire for it, and they weren't good tires. Try and find a 411 millimeter tire. I can, to this day, remember the size. Nimfluenced, hey Zach, great show. Have you heard any news regarding the Alfa Romeo? Any word on marketing events, specs, release dates? Tonelli, I don't really know. I don't know about that one, sorry. I would suggest that I do kind of know a little bit about there's going to be sort of another push for Alfa Romeo in North America. So I think we'll have to just wait and see. Jorge from Westchester, New York. Thanks to everybody for being here. All right, I'm just having a quick look down. Now, it is true because I do get caught up in where I kind of left off, and all kinds of people are piling on with their questions. So if it's really urgent for you to get your question answered, feel free to hit that super chat. Hello from Saskatoon. What do you think about the XT4 versus the Corsair? I would say that the Corsair is the handling one of the two. The XT4, I liked it. I thought they did a lot right with it. I like the styling of it. I like the interior of it. I like the way they put it together. I think they did a nice job. In my opinion, I found it a little bit too soft. And my big complaint with Lincoln is that most of their units are way too soft for my taste. They typically are available with air suspension, but the Corsair was the exception to that rule. So they made the Corsair much more European driving handling sort of characteristics. I actually really liked it. It was a nice surprise. The engine is powerful, the handling and the way it feels is first rate. The XT4, the only one I liked was the sporty model that did have the upgraded suspension. Other than that, it was too soft. But somebody who likes that will probably really like it. Hey, Zach, good to see your thoughts on new F1 rules starting next season. Drivers and teams to watch out for. Lewis going to Ferrari. I have to tell you, I used to be the biggest Formula One fan. Biggest. And then when the kids were born, well, I'll tell you the real reason. It's Jack's fault, my oldest son. In those days, you used to have a VCR. I would record all the races. I'd wake up on a Sunday morning because the races in Europe were on like 4 or 5 in the morning Pacific time. And then I'd turn the race on, get my cup of coffee and start watching. I loved it, loved everything about it. He broke the VCR and I never replaced it because VCRs kind of went out. And then I stopped watching Formula One. And I used to watch I can tell you, I've been watching Formula One since the 70s. That's how old I am. And I kind of got out of it. And you know what? I didn't miss it, to be honest with you. I think there's more exciting racing out there. I should probably follow it more. Mervyn says, hey, Zach, just wanted to say hello. I'm enjoying these live shows. Appreciate it. Outside of BC, what's your favorite place to take a road trip in Canada? And outside of Canada? That's a very good question. My favorite places, like I've been all over the world. You can see the map behind me. Somebody asked on one of the live chats what event I was in Iceland for, and that was for the Land Rover Discovery Sport. I've been to Africa, I've been to China, I've been all over through Europe. But I have to say, 2 of my favorite places are right here in Canada. So in Canada, Newfoundland, absolutely stunningly beautiful. Newfoundland is gorgeous. And then a territory, which is the Yukon Territory, north of British Columbia, is absolutely gorgeous. Those are my 2 favorite places to take a car and drive just through the most spectacular scenery you will ever see. In the United States, I would say the most beautiful place I've ever been in the United States is Utah. It is absolutely gorgeous. Moab, all of that area through there is just spectacular. So those are 2 spots for sure, or 3 spots I should say, in North America. Reference PHEVs. Why don't they talk about the fact that internal combustion engine has to run to heat the cabin? Doesn't mean winter will nullify the savings during cold months. It depends on, some of them will run on electric heat and have a heat pump, and others do not. I'm trying to remember what vehicle I drove recently. It was a plug-in. No, it was actually the Niro, the Kia Niro, the electric one, and the base model didn't have an extra heat pump, and on the top trim did. So yeah, I think that's part of the problem with hybrids, even just not even plug-in hybrids, is you need to warm the engine up in order to get cabin heat. I don't think that's the case for all of them off the top of my head. This is from Single Malt. That's another good name. Speaking of Single Malt, I'll have a sip of my Italian wine. Single Malt. That's a good handle. That might get it. I think it could be number 4. Very close. So we have a DJ Pleasure Seeking Missile is number 1. Huge Haggis is number 2. Charlottetown Spud is number 3. And Single Malt, that could be number 4. I'm not going to go out on a limb. Thanks for the advice on the Mustang GT as the it car for fun. Where was the launch from your reviews 3 years ago? Duffy Lake Road, perhaps. Trying to remember. Oh no, the launch was in California. Was that the yellow car? What color was it? The orange car? I've done a couple of Mustang events, 2 of them in California, and then I had one to drive here as well. I don't remember it being a launch event in Canada. But the road I drove for the Mustang GT a year or so ago was in California. Gated shifter community. I understand why wet clutch, dual clutch transmissions have better cooling than the dry clutch ones, but what I don't get is what makes them shift smoother. Can you explain? I can't. I'm sorry. I can give you the basics about dual clutches, but I don't know all the other idiosyncrasies. That would be a great question for somebody from a transmission manufacturer. And maybe the next time, well, when we get back out on the road and can actually go and meet some of these people again, that's the one thing that, people say, are you really missing out on anything being able to drive cars here locally at home? Yeah, you miss out with the one-on-one with the people that make the cars, engineer the cars, design the cars. You actually sit at dinner and chat with these people, have a beer with them, and they're really amazing people. So if you're sitting there with a driveline engineer for a car company, you get to ask some pretty cool questions. I don't know the answer to that. Mo says, hey Zach, have you seen the new spy photos of the Corolla SUV to fit below CHR? Apparently we may see this as opposed to the Yaris Cross. I have not seen that. There is another utility, I'm trying to remember the name of it, that was shown as a release for the Japanese market a week or so ago. There was some chat in here about that as well. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Is that the one you mean? You mentioned a couple of shows ago that paying cash instead of lease finance could get a much lower purchase price, but don't you often say to negotiate the price first? Big fan of yours, by the way. Yes, this is a bit of there's so few people that buy cash, right? Most people finance or lease. So what you can do is, this is where Car Cost Canada will also help. Go in there and have a look and see. The other thing you can do is, before you actually start to negotiate the price of the car, don't go and see the salesperson. Don't go and see the sales manager. Go and speak to the person in the business office. This is the person that does all the paperwork when it's time to close the deal. And you can just go in and say, hey, I understand, you can get a better rate for a car or a better deal on a car if you're a cash buyer. And often they'll tell you, and that's quite often the case. And some brands actually market the fact, if you're a cash buyer, it's greatly reduced. So just innocently ask the question and go, oh, I've heard that you might be able to get a better deal if you're a cash buyer. See what they say. And then go in and negotiate the price. So I don't really know any other trick other than that, or just be straight up with the salesperson and say, yes, I'm here to negotiate the best price and I'm a cash buyer. They'll be much happier to deal with you than having to deal with finance and leasing, applications and all that kind of stuff. Hey Zach, what do you think of the original Acura Legend and Vigor in the 90s? My dad had was it the first year? He had a I think it's the first year. He had a 1989 Acura Legend 4-door with the 2.7 liter 6-cylinder, I believe, and a manual 5-speed. It was a beautiful car to drive. It went like hell. That transmission was beautiful. The engine just revs so freely. I mean, just think about that. What was a full-size car in those days, or pretty close to a full-size car, with a manual transmission. So he drove it for years, and then my brother had it for years, and then the parts for it started to get too expensive, and then it slowly faded away. But the original Legend was a great car, and then when they brought out the Legend Coupe, the next generation, I thought that was a fantastic car. Vigor, not so much. Hey, here's Huge Haggis. Hey, Zach, Nancy, Nicholas, and I are live streaming on the way back from Hamilton. Oh, and my gas warning light is on. Yikers. Hopefully you'll get some gas. So, Nate, thanks for tuning in. And thanks to Little Haggis and Mrs. Haggis from Scotland, the Glaswegian in the car. I teased Huge Haggis that he has a base model Micra S with no air conditioning and wind down windows. I said, you've been hanging out with the Scots for too long. All that thriftiness, that tightness is wearing off on you. So he likes to save a buck. That's just good. Good for you. Your thoughts on the next generation WRX STI? It's going to be on the next. It's going to be on the global platform. It's going to be a much improved car. It's way overdue. Other than that, I really can't tell you anything. I've seen, we've seen concepts of the next WRX shown at auto shows, and my problem with Subaru is their concepts look fantastic, and then when they bring them out, they just look like a clumsy-looking Subaru again. I just wish that they would really just follow through on some of their pretty nice looking concept vehicles. Raul says, hey, what's your opinion on diesel engines? Don't they pollute more than gasoline engines? Beside torque, what advantages versus gasoline? Okay, there are two different ways to measure tailpipe, not emissions, because that's kind of confusing. Carbon, CO2, the greenhouse gas, is a direct result of how much fuel you burn. We'll use miles per gallon. If you get 30 miles per gallon, you're polluting at 30 miles per gallon. If you can get 40 miles per gallon, then you're polluting less. That's CO2. That means the vehicle is putting less CO2 into the atmosphere. So diesel engines are particularly good at getting really good fuel economy. And that might not be a bad example. So you buy one SUV and it's got a gasoline engine, and then you buy the same SUV but with a diesel engine, and it does get, maybe 10 miles per gallon better fuel economy. So that reduces CO2. That's why in Europe they went so heavily into diesel vehicles, because they wanted to reduce CO2, greenhouse gas emissions. And they can do that. In fact, the most efficient internal combustion vehicles you can buy are diesels, okay? Now, there's a second part to that. What comes out of the tailpipe isn't just CO2. CO2, by the way, is invisible. You cannot see it. What you can see coming out of a tailpipe are the pollution. That's different. One is a greenhouse gas, and what you see is pollution. That's the particulate, that's the soot, that's the exhaust, that's the nitrous oxide, that's the stuff that affects your lungs and creates smog over cities. That classic picture of smog over downtown LA, for example. So that's where diesel engines fall down. They have dirtier tailpipes when it comes to pollution, but they produce way less CO2. So they're green on one hand and dirty on the other. So what the car companies did to cheat was they falsified how much pollution, the nitrous oxide and the grit and the soot and everything that came out of the tailpipe. That's what they did. So other advantages, diesel engines last a long, long time. If you maintain them, they can run 1 million miles. They have much better fuel efficiency, amazing torque. Those are just some of the advantages. I love how when you did Mazda reviews, you emphasize Z versus Z. Yeah, you know what's interesting? The whole American-Canadian thing seems to have settled down. I remember, 5-6 years ago, whenever you would do a review of a Mazda, people would just type the nastiest stuff in the comment boxes, all Americans, because they go, what the hell is a Mazda? It's a Mazda. Don't you know? You're an idiot. And I would, on my reviews of Mazda, say it's Z and Z are different depending on where you live in the world. But what I've noticed is, I think a lot of car enthusiasts that watch videos have sort of been educated a little bit that the last letter of the alphabet is only said Z in the United States, and the rest of the English-speaking world is Z, like the UK, Australia, and here in Canada. So there you go. Can you shed some light on the review process you do from picking up the car to dropping it off? This is from Boston Ma. Boston Ma, I hope you saw your GTI featured on the show last time around. Okay, so we typically get a press car for a week. Monday is the pickup and drop off day. So that's the day I really don't do anything with the car. I just return the car I have and I pick up the next car. And then Andrea will drive me between, or she'll drop me off one and pick up the other. Sometimes I drop the car off on a Sunday and then she drives me to pick up the next one on a Monday. So Monday is pick up and drop off day. And then what I do is I look at the weather and I see what the weather's going to be like. And then I pick a day. It's different during COVID-19 because I got way more time on my hands. So for example, I have the Nissan Titan, Yesterday, I did all the shots of the outside and all the shots of the inside of the truck. Today, Andrea and I did the car to car where I drive behind our Cayenne and we shoot the big truck. And then tomorrow will be the actual on-camera review process where I'm talking. And then I put it all together. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it right now during COVID-19. When I was traveling all the time, I would have to kind of do that all in one day. So it's nice to have more time. Portuguese Water Dog. Hey, Zach, what Canadian car websites do you like? The one that I used to love was Canadian Driver. Remember that? And then it got bought out by Auto Trader. And the guys that started Canadian Driver, it was a really good site. It was really well done, and I miss it. So they're really, I mean, driving.ca, Wheels, and Auto Trader kind of are the big ones in Canada. Here's the thing is I don't read really anybody else's reviews. Just got to catch up where I was here. Is it a myth that dealerships give better deals at the end of the month? That is not a myth. What you can also try to find out is what is their quarter. And it's not that hard to do because you can find out when a car company's quarter is. A lot of car companies, their quarter, Asian brands seem to be end of February, end of March. Anyway, if you can find out when the actual annual, quarterly, finances are due, and then you can also relate that to the car dealership, because the car dealers don't just get paid when they sell cars. A lot of them get paid a bonus at the end of a quarter. And yes, if there is a bonus to get a car sold before the end of the month, they will do that. They'll be much more willing to deal on the very last couple of days of a month. If they're trying to hit a certain quota and sell a certain number of cars, and then they can get a bonus check from the manufacturer. So there is some truth to that. So buying at the end of the month can definitely be your friend. And if you know when the quarter ends for the car company, then you can time it around that as well. Your opinion about buying a 2017 Fiat 124 Spider. Is Fiat shutting shop in North America? Would you consider it? Thanks. You'd have to get a much better deal on it than you would for a MX-5 Miata. The thing is, it does have more power, and it's a nice looking car. I think they did a pretty good job on the styling of it. I would say that it's not going to be as reliable as the Miata. Unfortunately, the stories are that it isn't. So please look at it and get a good deal on it. Now, the thing is, I don't think that, put it this way, the Fiat might go away, but their Chrysler will still be here. Like FCA isn't going anywhere. So even if they cease to sell Fiats in North America, the dealerships that sold them are still going to be around. So for every Fiat store, there's an equivalent Chrysler, Dodge, or Ram dealership associated with it. So you'd still be able to get the vehicle serviced and get parts for it through the Chrysler dealer. So that's something to consider. I haven't heard anything about it going away. They certainly have ditched the 500. They're not selling a lot of cars. That car didn't sell particularly well. You have got to get a screaming deal on it compared to an MX-5 to justify the risk compared to that. Hey, Zach, why do people criticize so much the IS350 and TLX compared to the German rivals? Are they really that superior? Here's the interesting thing. I just put a request in to get an IS350 because I haven't driven it in a long time, and they have a black edition or whatever it's called. So that's going to be in June, so I can give you an up-to-date view on the car. I would suggest that the IS has been left on the vine too long. That's the main criticism of the car. It is really aged in place where other brands have been much more aggressive when it comes to updating their cars. The back seat is kind of small in the IS. It isn't a real performance car. It's always going to, at its core, still be a Lexus. And that is a bigger market. I think that they believe that Lexus appeal, being refined and smooth and isolated and all those sorts of things, is a bigger market than having a sharp car. So not a smart car, a sharp driving car. So I think that's one of the criticisms against it, is that they just left it too long, hasn't been updated, and was never really a sharp car. It was more of a good, just all-rounder. Now, the TLX, in my opinion, they had two great cars. They had the Acura TL. I never liked the styling of it that much, but it was a fantastic car. And the TSX was a really good car. A bit noisy, but a really good car. And they dropped those, and then they put them together and came up with one okay car. And then they didn't really follow through on the promise of replacing those other vehicles. So the transmissions were not that great. It didn't feel as solid as the old TL. It didn't feel as nimble as the old TSX. So it's not that it's a bad car, in my opinion. It didn't live up to the previous models that were so great. And then the same thing. The car's kind of been left on the vine too long, where other brands are continually updating them. Comments on Lexus and their direction. Well, I think they're going to get the grills even bigger. What do you think of that? I hope not. I don't think so. Philip316 says, GLI versus GTI. This is a super chat, so that's how you get your question answered right away. GLI better buy. It's cheaper and comes with cooled seats, ambient lighting, etc. I wouldn't need the extra hatch space. What's your take? I agree with you. I think that the GLI is one of those rare little kind of deals in the car space right now. It's kind of a fun car to drive. It's the best looking Jetta, hands down. It handles really quite well. It's got the same running gear basically as the GTI, and it is a better packaged car. You get more content for your money. So I think that I agree with you 100%. So if you like the GLI and you don't need the hatch, go for it. I think that they had that anniversary edition last year, which was really nice. Comes with a lot of really good standard equipment. So I agree with you. The other one that you should check out if you drive manual is the Civic Si. That's another very nice car. Lexus and their direction. I don't really know. I think that Lexus is going to continue to produce high quality cars that just work for people, and those people will continue to come back. You might not know that Lexus in the United States is an absolute mammoth brand. It isn't in Canada. Lexus is absolutely huge in the United States, especially when you go to states like California. They're everywhere. And Lexus really became the traditional luxury alternative when Cadillac and Lincoln went through their tough times over the last 20 years. Lexus was there to grab all those traditional luxury buyers. It's not as clear-cut as it once was for Lexus being that far ahead, but I think they're going to continue to do exactly what they do well, produce high-quality cars that appeal to a wide swath of people. DS negotiating price. If you're paying cash, don't give them any more info than they need. Okay, that's somebody. Oh yeah, by the way, we have 184 people on board and 86 likes. So if you can hit the like, some people can't hit it when they're on their phone. They can't do it, or you have to exit and then do it. If you can hit the like, hit it. Let's get that thing over 100. I don't like the idea of monthly payments, but I also like the idea of paying up front and then wanting something newer after just a few years and having to eat all the depreciation. Well, here's the thing about that. It's really in your head. How many times have you ever bought and sold cars? How many times have you, like in the old days, taken out a loan, say for $10,000, and then you drive the car for 3 or 4 years and then you want to sell it, and the loan is pretty much exactly what you owe on the car. So when you lease a car, if you're somebody that likes to flip cars all the time, leasing a car is not a bad way to go, because you have guaranteed costs, you have a guaranteed exit strategy, you know exactly what the payments are going to be, and your car is always under warranty. So if you're somebody that always likes to flip their cars regularly, instead of paying cash and paying tax, you're paying the tax all up front, Now, of course, you get to trade it in and defer that tax for the next vehicle, but leasing can be, if you like to flip your cars on a regular basis, can be a great way to do it. What's your opinion of the 2021 Elantra hybrid coming in the fall with the 6-speed dual clutch rather than a CVT? It looks pretty sporty with 138 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. Yeah, I think that it's going to be quite interesting that they have that available, and they did have an automatic transmission with their hybrids already. Okay, so that's one of the nice things about the Hyundai and the Kia hybrids is that they don't use a CVT. It has a much more normal and natural feel to it. So I think it's a great idea. It's going to be interesting to see how it does up against Corolla. I think that we'll have to see what the packaging is on it, because unfortunately Corolla is only sold with one trim. But yeah, that is a nice option to have something different. And then the issue I have with the Elantra, the new one I saw, it seems to me in the styling department, it's just trying too hard. Like just trying to be too edgy and different looking. Maybe they have come to realize that the only way to get people to buy sedans is to come up with something really quite different, but it's not a good look for me. I don't like it. You mentioned that the Chevy Cruze is one of the quietest compacts. How does the 19 and 20 Mazda 3 sedan compare in comfort and quietness to you? Well, it is. These cars are quite quiet now. It's funny you mention that because I just drove the Mazda 3. I didn't drive the sedan. I drove the hatchback. And I can clearly remember thinking to myself that, boy, it's very quiet and very smooth. You can't even feel the engine at idle, considering it's a 4-cylinder. So yeah. And here's the thing. I think that this latest generation Mazda 3 is an absolutely beautiful car. If you do a lot of highway driving, it is really nice on the highway. So I can recommend it for that, not a problem at all. The Cruze is just softer and quieter and more muted in every way. Hey, we got some more other super chats here. Zach, thanks for the live chats. Well, thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. Uvit says, I'm buying a Maloo GTSR. Would you ever buy one? I'm not sure what that is. Maloo, I got to look that up now. Now I'm intrigued. I got to have a look. Maloo. Is it something I don't... Maloo car. Oh, a Ute. Is that the Holden? Yeah, the Holden. That's a cool. Hey, do you know what? All right, so now I know what you're talking about. That was the mule they used for the C8. You probably have seen some articles on that. They used the Holden Ute body and put the Corvette inside it. Or they made it look like that. So yeah, I mean, I've been to Australia and seeing those Holdens are pretty neat. Why not? Where are we here? What's up with car manufacturers not putting in spare tires and shrinking fuel tanks? No one cares until you get a flat tire or run out of gas on the side of the road. Well, the no spare is just purely around fuel economy. They figure they can get the fuel rating, improve the fuel rating, or get the fuel economy up or down, depending on which side of the border you're on, by removing that heavy spare tire. That's what BMW has done. I don't agree with it. I like having a spare tire. I like even having a full-size spare tire. I would give up that fuel economy benefit. But as I mentioned, car companies don't build cars for you and me. They build cars for government, regulations. I think the wine is making me burp. For regulations, so that's why they do it. And smaller fuel tanks, it could just be a packaging issue. Hey Zach, what's the best way to go about buying classic cars here in Canada? Someday I want to get my hands on an Eleanor. Well, that's pretty neat. I think the best way to find out about this is to go into classic car forums and you'll find that. And often, so I wouldn't limit yourself just to Canada, by the way. I would get into the forums. Like if there's a Mustang Eleanor forum and you can find it easily, just type it in and get in there. And what you'll start to see are people who are in Canada who are also sharing your passion. So it might be an international forum, but then you can connect with those people and send them messages and say, hey, I really like your car. Where did you get it? Do you know anybody that has one? That's how you're going to find it. That's a very limited car and really going to be hard to find here because it's a much smaller market. But get into a web forum, meet the people, introduce yourselves, be polite. That's one of the main things about web forums. And find out where the bodies are, where the cars are, and get to introduce yourself to the Canadians that also have the same passion. That's my best advice for you. Single Malt says, great shirt. Would Junior consider a draw and giveaway? Well, I can ask him. Morris Sport, by the way, Tony Morris Jr. Runs the Mitsubishi press fleet here on the West Coast, also the Volvo press fleet here on the West Coast, and he also has a company, Morris Sport Advanced Driving, where they do car events. Like, for example, if I go to an event somewhere in Canada for Honda, typically Tony is the guy that puts on the event and wrangles all the cars. And he's also a race car driver and does a whole bunch of other things. So I'll ask him, see what he says. Hey, Zach, to me it seems automotive quality has improved a lot over the last 10 to 20 years. Do you agree? How has that affected your job of reviewing and recommending cars? Well, it is kind of tricky that a lot of cars are really quite homogenous. It's not so much the quality, because having cars that are all high quality these days actually makes it easier because it's not really something that comes in to the conversation that much. The bigger issue is when all of the cars have the exact same features. Like, you got to know that when somebody sits down in a product planning office for a major car company, they have spreadsheets of all of the different cars in its class, and then they look at all of the different features and benefits that are available in that. Like, think of a mid-size sedan or a compact car. It is so generic now. That's the big problem. But I think that cars are much more reliable. Just think of the technology that is in a modern car today. I give this example. When I started reviewing cars in the early 90s, a Honda Civic in the Canadian market, you had to pay extra to get a passenger side mirror. It came with a driver mirror, a rear view mirror, but no passenger side mirror. You had to pay extra for that. And then the hatchback version didn't have a wiper. That was extra. And then they had crappy steel wheels with hubcaps. Now a Civic has, autonomous braking, all the mirrors, everything you could ever want. And the cars aren't that much more expensive in relative terms when you compare. So yeah, cars have become so good and so much content. And people say, well, they don't make cars like they used to. Well, that's good, because cars today are much better than they ever have been. Hey, Zach, do you think used cars and new leases will have large discounts because of the current COVID situation? There's two schools of thought on this. One is that car prices used might go down because there's not enough market, or they could actually start to rally a little bit because people will be looking at used cars instead of a new car. Prices for new cars are going to be very competitive. Now, it might not be that they're going to drop the price, but they're going to offer very low interest rates or 0% interest rates. There probably will be some kind of incentive on the hood to get you to get into the car. Car companies could add things like extra warranty as part of their packaging, and some other things that they can do to really spice up the new car purchase. The used car market is clearly just based on supply and demand by dealers trading in cars and selling cars. It could go either way, and we'll have to wait and see. Initially, what we're seeing is used car prices are coming down, but as I mentioned, if people start looking at used cars as an alternative to new, they could rally a bit. We'll have to wait and see. Raj says, what are your thoughts on ceramic brakes? Very expensive option. Does it cost a lot for a brake job? Well, The ceramic brakes, like if you're looking at a Porsche, for example, with ceramic brakes, the reality is not exactly the way it was advertised. They're supposed to be sort of lifetime. They were going to last really the life of the car. Very expensive, around $12,000 option on a 911, for example. Now, if you just drove the car regularly and didn't do anything too aggressive with it, that might be the case. But people who went to the track on the weekend and drove their cars hard, the brakes wore out. And some guys would get the cars and option them without ceramic brakes and just go for the big sort of turbo brakes, the big red brakes, because they were cheaper to just service on a regular basis. So they are fantastic though. Ceramic brakes are really impressive to use. They're so expensive. I'm sort of in the category that I probably wouldn't go for ceramic brakes myself. And if you're going to the track on a regular basis, my mechanic tells me not to get them, just to go for the regular brakes and then, you know, resurface them, not resurface them, but replace them more often. Hey, Zach, I live in downtown Vancouver, so I'm looking for a shorter length vehicle for ease of parking. I've narrowed it down to a 15 to 18 Golf R. Do you have a favorite of one of those? Narrowed down to a 15, I think what you're saying, a 15 or an 18 Golf R? Oh, I see what you're saying. The current generation or the previous generation, if you can afford the current generation Golf R, you will not be disappointed. So that's the one I would get. Get the newer one if you can. It's a great car. You're going to love it. Would you take new car to the dealership for service or to a garage? It really comes down to the relationship you have with the dealer. If the dealer is being very competitive on service pricing, then maybe take it to the dealer. I mean, there are advantages to going to the dealer. Software updates, technical service bulletins, original parts, and all those sorts of things. You don't know. You don't have to, is what I'm saying. You can take it to a mechanic, but please, if it's a new car that's still under warranty, make sure they follow the schedule that the owner's manual puts out. If the manual says this needs to be checked, that needs to be replaced, you have to have that itemized on your bill so that you can prove to the company that you have done the service to keep the warranty in check. So please do that. You do not have to go to the dealer, but like for example, on high-end cars, often the prices they charge for service are like ridiculously high. And, you know, unless they've got a really good sort of competitive rate, often you can get the same service done outside of the dealer for less money. That's one area where I think dealers really need to work on, is in, you know, having street level pricing, not boutique pricing. What makes the easiest to use infotainment system in the luxury segment? I think I think you just basically answered the question. What makes the easiest to use infotainment system? It has to be easy to use. I think you should be able to get into a car and figure out the infotainment system without having to, you know, spend a half an hour in the driveway. It should be intuitive and easy to understand. And I would suggest that car companies have gotten a lot better at this. There are still some clumsy ones out there. And I think that, you know, I think iDrive is one that has improved vastly. That's really what it is. It's how easy it is. Can you get in it and figure it out without having to spend an hour in there? I think is basically the best system. Have you driven the Nurburgring? No. So you've driven there. That's great. I have not. I've been to Hockenheim, but I haven't been to the Nurburgring. I keep on bugging my German car colleagues saying, hey, when are we going to do a car event at the Nurburgring? Live in Detroit, but moving back to, I live in Detroit, but moving back to Canada. Ideally a 2020 Civic Sport Hatch Touring. We'll need to buy a new car, easier than importing a US car. Good idea to get a Type R with the exchange rate. Well, if you're buying with US dollars in Canada, I think that the Type R is actually, when you look at the exchange rate, when you compare it, probably cheaper. Yeah, why not? If you can afford a Type R, it is a big upgrade over the car you've got. And if you can afford it, yeah, why not? Alex on cars. Hey Zach, I'm considering an AMG GT 4-door or Panamera. The only thing I dislike in the Panamera are the aircon vents controlled by main screen. Is it a problem? Sorry, I jumped around here. Is it a problem? I live in Israel in summer all year. Thank you. Now, I don't know if it's going to be an issue. Alex was the one, by the way, who had his Saab with 420 horsepower in Israel. So you have the lead right now for a car picture farthest away from where I live in Vancouver. I would suggest that once you set the air vents, you're probably just going to leave them. I thought it was a ridiculous thing too, that you had to go into a screen to move the air vents on the car. Like, there's just way too many things that can go wrong and way too many steps to do that. I mean, you usually just go and you fiddle with, and there you go, you're talking about the AMG that has those beautiful round vents and you just move it any direction you want. What I would suggest is probably what you're going to do is set them and forget them, which is what I would do. So you're not going to be in there a lot. It wouldn't stop me from buying the car because the rest of the car is just so good. So I wouldn't let it stop you because you can set everything in that car to you and your key. And so when you get in and start the car, it's going to set your seats, your side mirrors, your ventilation, even your favorite radio stations and all of that stuff for you. So that can be saved. I wouldn't let that stop you. Jorge says, from another super chat, can you discuss companies like BMW and Mercedes using run flats? They seem to run counter to all the money they spend on handling dynamics. Well, no, because the engineering of the tire is actually, it's beneficial to have a stiff sidewall and to have a stiff compound tire because cars, when you get into the corners, the tires roll on the side. So having that stiffer sidewall for performance and handling is beneficial. So the casing of the tire is going to be in their benefit. The problem is they could be too harsh, too noisy, all those sorts of things. It was done for weight. I don't think Mercedes was as bad a culprit as BMW, but BMW certainly was. Hey Zach, what are some of your favorite wines? Any good Riesling suggestions? Not a Riesling guy, or Riesling, depends on how you say it. I like Italian reds. That's my jam. I used to be into New World wines, California, Australia, Canadian, I do like Argentinian wines. And then neighbors of ours, we'd go over for dinner and they're always drinking Italian wine. And then I got onto the Italian wine. And that's pretty much all I drink now. I'm drinking, this is a Massey. It's what I'm drinking. Have you got any info on the new Toyota 86? No, I do not. Do you think the pendulum will switch back to analog dials and buttons versus the reliance on touchscreens? Well, I don't think we're going to have a massive shift back to that, but there will be brands and certain models that will go back that way. I'm pretty sure of it, that we're going to start to see some sort of retro sort of looks on the inside with just the sort of clean buttons and dials and switches and get away from the big screen. I wish that with the Taycan, the Porsche Taycan, instead of going to the screens and sort of mimicking what they're doing at Tesla, they had, like one screen and the rest was like real sort of retro 911 interior switches and dials. Now that would have been really cool. So the most modern, the fastest, the new age of electrification for Porsche had all of that, but then had some of the really cool old dash. I would have loved to have seen that. I think it's not going to be a wholesale switchback. I think we'll probably see some specific models that will embrace that. Stephen Boyd says, I'm on my 5th Honda car, love them. Now we have a 17 CRV. Nothing but problems and poor service. That's too bad. Just complaining. Sorry, what's happened to Honda's quality? I sort of am hearing that more and more that, Toyota continues to charge on producing high quality cars. You're seeing that on the Acura side and on the Honda side. I think that it's something that they can fix. But it's a real shame, especially with that CRV, with the 1.5 liter engine and the CVT. They made quite a lot of changes, right? So small turbocharged engine, continuously variable transmission. We're over at Toyota, large displacement, 4-cylinder, not turbocharged, good old 6-speed automatic transmission, stuff that just works. And I think that's what they kind of push things too far along, and you can get stung. The Germans have been doing that forever. The Germans will bring out new technology and be damned. They're going to do it anyway, and they get knocked down for their quality until they perfect it. Look at iDrive, for example. iDrive was so maligned when it came out, and rightfully so. It was terrible when it first came out in the 7 Series. But then they've improved it to the point where it's actually the best in the German space. So I think that's really what they're going through. Pushing things maybe too far, and then they'll have to right the ship. And I'm sure Honda will. What's your opinion on the Venue? I'm thinking of going to buy this car. I'm 19. I don't know, Mark. Do you really want a utility at 19? Andrea and I were talking about this, my wife. There's Andrea there. She says, if I was a young person, I would buy a car. I mean, you've got your whole life to buy utilities and put shitty diapers in the back with strollers and car seats. Don't get ahead of yourself. I mean, what do you need a utility for? Maybe have a fun car for a little while. Try that first. I'm not telling you not to buy it. It's going to do everything you want, but you can get a lot more product for your money buying a car versus a utility. Just think about it. Don't just run out and buy a utility. Thoughts on a 2020 Golf R? Would you get the GTI to save some money? Thanks. Well, the 2021 Golf R and GTI have not been announced yet. I mean, that's the good. No, the GTI has. The Golf R we haven't seen. The GTI was shown virtually around the time of the Geneva Motor Show. So let's wait and see what they do with the Golf R. It's going to be very interesting to see. Is it going to be available with a manual transmission? There's rumblings that it will not be. So I think that's what you have to sort of look at and think for yourself. Is it a car that you really want to commit to when you don't really know what it is yet? I say we've got over a year to figure that out. Hey, Zach. Based partially on your review, I bought an Infiniti EX35. The car is a 2008. Solid performance to this day. Thank you for the excellent review you provide. Well, that's a cool car, actually. They don't make that one anymore, which is too bad. But yeah, I'm glad it worked out. If it hadn't, that wouldn't have been good. Thoughts on the 2016 Ford Explorer? I plan on maybe getting a used one. Do you think it would be worth it, or should I get a different large SUV? Also thinking of a type of full-size SUV. Well, the Explorer isn't exactly known as the best in its class when it comes to much, really. I would suggest that a used Highlander would be a very, very good buy. And then now if you're thinking about a body-on-frame larger utility vehicle, I really do like the General Motors, like the Chevy Tahoe and the Suburban and those vehicles. They just work. They are very reliable. They're simple. If you need that space, they are going to do a good job. The Explorer, there's nothing really that great about it, in my opinion. I don't think it's a real standout. I'm not sure which engine you're considering. I think if you're going to buy a 4-year-old, 3-row utility, a Highlander would be pretty hard to beat. If it's just for moving kids around and stuff like that, there you go. What's your advice can you give me on buying a Miata? Should I wait for prices to fall? I'm not sure if you're talking about a new or a used one. We'll have to wait and see. There's not a lot. Well, there are a lot of used ones. It depends on what year you're looking at. It's such a small niche car in the new market. I don't think they're going to drop the prices dramatically unless sales shrivel up entirely, which I don't think they will. It's not a major volume car. So if they're going to put incentives on a car, it's going to be on the CX-5. It's not going to be on the MX-5 because the MX-5 is such a low volume car. All I can say is keep an eye out and watch. How would you rate the 2020 Dodge Durango? I have driven both GT and RT. Great sporty ride given its size, but worry about its reliability. I really do like the Durango a lot. Now, I have been on record many times saying I'm a big fan of the Grand Cherokee and of the Durango. It's the same vehicle, just a little bit longer. So they have the same engine, same running gear, same platform. One is just elongated. And I know that the reliability of these two FCA products is really quite high, higher than not all of them. Like the Chrysler 300, the Dodge Charger are the highest quality in the FCA family, but the Grand Cherokee and the Durango are up there as well. I have no problem recommending the vehicle. I'm not sure if you need the Hemi or not. The 3.6 liter is fine. It is, in my opinion, of the mainline utility vehicles, it is the handling vehicle of choice. So it doesn't have all of the fancy running gear that you get with the Grand Cherokee, like air suspension and all those sorts of things, but it's going to do a good job, and give it a shot. Now, this vehicle, like the Grand Cherokee, is at the end of its run. It is going to be replaced when, we don't know, but certainly these products are now 10 years old now, okay? So go in there and try and get the best deal you can, but I have no problem in recommending it at all. Okay, we have over 200 people on right now. I'd like to get the likes up. More likes, please. Hit the like button. We have 138. Every time I ask you to do it, you do it. So that's great. We're just past an hour now, so we'll see if we can do one or two more questions. It was Super Chat. Armin says, if Mazda can make an MX-5 profitable, why can't Honda do the same with a modern CRX? What a great car they were. It was a great car, and a load, especially the SI. The thing is, you've got to remember that they have been making the same car since 1989. Not the same car, but they've been making an MX-5 or a Miata for all those years. So they have the line set up for that. They're consistently updating the vehicle, consistently updating the research and development on it. So I think that it's easier for them to make a car and evolve it than it is to start from scratch. But I don't know why some of these car companies just stopped making cars that were very popular and successful. Another one from Honda is the Element, you know, the real square one. They made it, people loved it, they sold it, and then they stopped making it. Like, why? Why not update it and give us something new? I totally agree with you. I would love to see a CRX come back. They had the CRZ or the CRZ. Unfortunately, it was only sold as a hybrid. If they had come out with a gas version and the hybrid version, that would have been a much better way to go. All right, we are up against the clock right now. We're up to 154 likes. Don't forget to go to Car Cost Canada and use the promo code MOTORMOUTH. I get a few days off now. Hey, and if you want to get your car pictures in, I'm going to go through them one more time here again. We will get them on Sunday. So there's Mike in Moncton. Here's Howard's car, his Golf R. Here's Christine and her LC500. Here's Ezra and his Stelvio. Here's Eric from Montreal and his Hyundai Accent. Here's Charlottetown Spud and his Civic Type R. Next is Tom with his three cars, his S4, his SQ5, and his Carrera 4S. That's a nice looking garage, dude. There's Don Collier with his Hellcat. Hell yeah. Sir Eric from, Sir Frederick from Saskatoon with his G70, his wife's Cruise, and the family Carmen Gia. Then we have Alex from Israel with his Saab 9.5, who's maybe going to get a Panamera, which would be a fabulous car. Chris K with his two Mustangs, his old Boss 302 and his latest Mustang GT. Addy from Montreal with another beautiful, I love that Mustang with the gray. It looks so good. And his RDX A-Spec. Then we have Nim in Waterloo, speaking of the Grand Cherokee. There's the SRT, one hell of a car. Then we have Dwayne from the US with his Mazda 6 or his Mazda 6. Speaking of Durango, there's John with his Durango. We have Simon from Vancouver Island with his Intermechanica. This is Grant with his XL7 Suzuki. There's Chris from Indiana with his GLI. And then we have from Florida, Flat Six Rules with his three cars, his 330E, his wife's Raptor, and his Carrera 4S. That's a hell of a garage too. All right, We are all out of time. I got to go and eat. I'm having spaghetti and meatballs tonight. How good is that? We'll talk to you on Sunday. Take care, everybody. I'll speak to you then.